Matt and Mark Justice Brothers, bringing you Tackle today. All of the top stories, the interesting charts in a concise matter each and every day. Matt, we're having a little hesitation day in the market. It would be totally normal for a few sessions to take a break, pull back a little bit, form a high base. That is our base case right now. And what are you seeing in what some might say a boring day, but interesting development day, if nothing else?
I think this is the most fascinating day we've had in a few days, and I know it's crazy
I agree. I agree.
when you're seeing that small red candle come in. You're like, "Oh, it must be a boring day," and it certainly is. There's not a lot of tremendous news coming into the market, and that's not going to start happening from the excitement level until we start getting into Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. The real important information is on the back half of this week with Jackson Hole, obviously, but a lot of traders, obviously, at tackle trading and around the world are looking at the technical condition, and the market's been up 8 straight days. And this melt up, I think, is an accurate description of the market, discounting any negative information in any capacity. Earnings reports that during earnings season got sold or getting gobbled up in this condition. We often joke it's a good moment to report earnings. Well, the last week has been a really good moment to report earnings. I can, off the top of my head, I can think of 4 reports that had slight drops in guidance, but actually went up on their actual report because of the strong bullish mentality of the market in this last couple week stretch. But with that said, all things come to a conclusion. And when you see that from a technical perspective, you see it from a candlestick perspective first. And that's what that little red candle really kind of suggests is, this current movement is starting to slow down a little bit. Is it over? I don't know any better than anybody else does, but it is starting to slow down, and I think that is a good thing. The market cannot continue just to melt up from a technical perspective. You get a little too overextended in those conditions, and quite frankly, you don't even want the market to melt up like that, because
You actually become more susceptible to something bad happen.
you have volatility pockets in those
Yep.
scenarios where all of a sudden it's like you're flying in an airplane 40,000 feet in the air, and all of a sudden you're flying at 37, right? You hit an air pocket. Well, that happens in volatility. So you want to see secondary patterns develop here, and you certainly want to see some degree of hesitation going into Jackson Hole on Friday with Powell's speech. So, well, one day does not make a pattern, but it certainly does start to bring in the slowing momentum conversation, and that's happening at a little bit of resistance. Now, I would argue that you've had a little bit of resistance from 555 all the way up to 560 here, but at the end of the day, the market's going to settle down where it does, and at 560 it does make some sense. 560, 565 is kind of that all-time high pricing there. And Mark, oftentimes the market starts having this magnet, and until it achieves something, nothing else happens, right? And kind of what is happening here. There's a magnet at that all-time high. Now we're starting to ding into it. Now we're starting to see the slowing momentum, and quite frankly, probably needed a little bit of profit taking here to really align going into Jackson Hole on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not a lot of news out there today, Matt. Economic reports, literally none. Just a little bit of Fed speak. Fed speakers have generally been pointing towards, hey, yeah, we're cutting, right? Jay Powell will confirm or deliver the message on Friday. But Matt, there was a surprising amount of individual stock news, including some like big names that reported earnings in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, quietly speaking, their stocks start to come back into the light when you start have a little bit of slowing momentum, and it stops becoming just a market story. You start focusing a little bit more on those individual components, and we certainly do have a little bit of those individual components reporting here today. Palo Alto came out with a strong beat against expectation, 151 against 141. But there was some caution in their guidance, and I've seen that a lot in the last week. Decent to good, if not really good EPS beats, decent to good, if not really good revenue beats, but a little bit of concern on the guidance front. Even Walmart, which was a really good report, had a little bit of concern on the guidance side of the equation. But Palo Alto's dropping guidance, probably Palo Alto's going up today, but Palo Alto's dropping guidance probably gets sold if it wasn't for their direct competitor in CrowdStrike and what's going on with CrowdStrike. And obviously, the environment is playing a little bit of role in that as well. Lowe's comes out and they delivered a solid beat, 306 against 294. Once again, had a little bit of concern on the guidance front. So yet another example of a beat with a little bit of concern, not tremendous concern, but a little bit of concern as they do slightly drop their forward-looking guidance. And then AMD was in the news here today, because semiconductors are in the news, quite frankly, right now, as they're setting up in some degree of secondary patterns following a tremendous amount of volatility. And in that tremendous amount of volatility, AMD was one of the worst of the bunch. They got sold off very aggressively after a really good opportunity from a technical perspective on a breakout. They got sold off aggressively, and now they're recovering all the way back up into that 160 level. And when Edward Jones initiates coverage, which is not necessarily an upgrade, but it's kind of seen as that to a certain extent, obviously you're going to look at AMD here and you're going to say, okay, do we got something? Maybe you're starting to work up against up above shorter duration moving averages, and this 160 level here you could certainly see a little bit of a high base, maybe a flag base pattern as you're slightly overextended there. And in those initial movements on AMD, it's like, oh, real power move, 120 to 160. Well, that's because it dropped from 190 to 120, and so it's basically retracing 50% of what it gave up. And so secondary pattern here is going to be very important in AMD. On to Palo Alto, who was the top billing here today. They are gapping and running. And Mark, this is yet again, is Palo Alto getting a bid because of CrowdStrike's weakness? Or are they getting a bid because of the beat? Or are they getting a bid because of the environment? Because the guidance was slightly concerning as they were at 151 EPS. They dropped to 147 to 149. This is, I don't want to say it's rare in this earnings season for a drop in guidance and stock to go up. I just didn't see it a lot. And I certainly didn't see it nearly as much as
I'll say it. It's rare. I
week.
follow you. You're my earnings expert. I didn't see a lot of that of you reporting on that, right?
No, it was slight EPS beats. The general theme in earnings was slight EPS beats, inline revenue, and guidance was either slightly up or slightly down. But if you were down, you got beat.
Yeah, we certainly didn't see many 7% power moves.
No,
like in that
no.
situation.
No, so it's a little bit concerning when you see that type of euphoria from an earnings perspective. You want to get those things accurately priced, and with Palo Alto, it's not that I'm disagreeing with the market here. I don't have too strong of an opinion on Palo Alto. It's just a general trend I am seeing over the last week. Slight drops in guidance, stocks discounting that slight drop in guidance right now, and it goes to the general run up in the market more than anything, most likely there. On the Lowe's front, the third stock story of the day here, Lowe's delivered a decent beat, but they did have a little bit of concern on the guidance front. And you're probably seeing a little bit of the more accurate pricing here on Lowe's. Tried to go up, couldn't get up above resistance. It's not smoke back down, but a slight drop back down. It's almost like, wait a second, Lowe's, you didn't radically do something on a slight beat and a slight drop in guidance. That feels normal to me.
It feels normal, right?
It feels normal to me. Palo Alto feels a little bit abnormal in its pricing right now.
Yeah, I look forward in the Trade Justice podcast this weekend, kind of talking through that Palo Alto, kind of the different things it means. Because I think there's some interesting conversation there. So check out the Trade Justice podcast as we talk Palo Alto. We'll find another P to do that. Matt, I have gold surging, and I am very interested in oil. See if we can put in a bottom here at a support level. That's more of a conversation for a few days from now. Gold is a conversation today.
Gold's breakout from 2 days ago when it clipped the all-time high pricing was a really good technical setup, and now you're seeing a little bit of continuation follow through. The bid on gold right now is really based on the anticipation of the central bank cutting rates. A pause, economically speaking, from a monetary perspective, when the Fed is increasing interest rates, that's usually not the greatest sign for gold ownership because demand comes into the dollar. When the Fed goes into a pause, that's usually fairly decent for gold analysis. And we have seen gold in the pause from the central bank. They've been pausing ever since about right back here, Mark. I don't know if you recall, but back then we kept saying, they're going into a pause. They're going into a pause. They're going into the pause. Gold ownership is really, really positive going into the pause, because when you go into the pause, you're announcing to the entire market that stop buying the dollar. We're tapping out here. We're not going to pay any higher interest rate on the dollar. Stop buying the dollar. Well, if you're going to stop buying the dollar and the dollar's going to stop going up, gold's going to have a good moment there. When you go into the cutting phase of monetary policy, now you're increasing the supply on the dollar, which typically gets a bid on gold because of the divergent behavior that gold has on against the dollar. And so you're seeing a little bit of that being priced in right now, Mark. And so good bullish momentum here on gold. Some of that is because you're getting priced into that September, but in general, a cutting cycle is also positive for gold.
Yeah.
And so pauses are positive for gold.
Gold has a lot of I
gold.
win this way, I win that way.
Gold doesn't win when the Fed raises rates. That's what. And so
see 2022, right?
Say again.
Oh, see 2022, right? They were raising rates. Gold had a rough year, right?
Yeah. Now on the silver and just on the industrial metal front, we're tracking a little bit of their bullish reversals here. Silver's having a V-shaped reversal here as it is not pivoting in that head and shoulders type formation. I totally expect a little bit of a pullback here on silver to really kind of dial that in. Just a minor one, but that silver's starting to pump a little bit. On the copper side of the equation, really dialing in that 4.2 level here, Mark.
Yeah, it is.
I've had that level drawn since that pivot here all the way back just 3 weeks ago. It's still the level there. I would love it to even take a little bit more time, but it's going to break 4.2. When it breaks 4.2, and copper looks like it's reversing, silver looks like it's reversing here. Gold's breaking out with momentum on the industrial and precious metal side of the equation, starting to look fairly decent. On the crude oil side, from a pure technical perspective, Mark, when you are looking at crude oil, really battling that support level, very important support level, not ready for prime time directionally in any capacity, but I do know you like to start initiating some cash flow in these environments.
Yeah, I like taking shots on big, huge moves down where you have a support level, right? I like piddling, taking small shots, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah. So that's all we got for Commodity Corner there, Chucky. Why don't you go ahead and send us out?
Yeah, listen, we're going to have continued extended conversation of these, talk about individual stock patterns that we're interested in, answer questions in our Traders Lounge today. If you want to join the Traders Lounge every day, go sign up for a 15-day free trial at tackletrading.com.